Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this week. We have a great topic and guest this week, and we'll jump right into it. But quickly, before we do, welcome back to all the people who have joined us for the previous 3 weeks, and welcome to anyone new. I always mention at the start of these that we've got people on from all levels and ages, and sometimes some of these things for the new people joining us, sometimes some of the things we talk about may be slightly above your level of play or age, and sometimes it may be slightly below your level of play or age, but we're going to do our best to try to give everyone a couple pieces that they can take away, especially today with our topic of off-ice development and habits. And our format this week will be run our guest speaker first, who we'll get to in 1 second. I'll go through a quick presentation, and then we'll open it up to Q&A at the end for the last 5 or 10 minutes if there are any questions. So moving right into our guest speaker, this is a guy I'm really excited to have on today. A guy I've known personally for a long time now and had the privilege to train with actually when I was still playing hockey. He's one of the best guys in the business when it comes to strength and conditioning and anything off ice. So we're really lucky to have him on today. Matt Nicholas joining us. I'm sure many of you guys have heard the name. He's trained a ton of NHL players, a ton of athletes in general, from football players to hockey players to Olympians. Former strength and conditioning coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs back in the day, and also one of the founders of BioSteel sports drinks, which I'm sure all you guys have seen at some point. But thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Jumping right into it here, we've kind of, no matter what our topic is every week, we've tried to touch on COVID. I'm sure everyone's sick of talking about it by now, but our first question for all our guests is always COVID related and dealing with this situation we're in now and the current situation. And obviously this is a really suitable question to a guy like yourself, with kids not being able to have access to gyms in some places or ice time. I know from working with you in the past, you've always been a fan of finding kind of outside of the box ways to train. What would your message for young athletes right now going through COVID and all these restrictions and the pandemic be, and finding ways to still train and make yourself a better athlete?
It's a great question, and I'm going to answer it, but I want to say one thing first, for just a little shout out to you, Mike, and I want people to know this, that some of you might know Mike. You know, the logo there on the left is the GM or the coach of the Kitchener Rangers, and that's a great accomplishment. But I can tell you that I've been in this business for 22 years now, and I can honestly say that, Mike, you were one of the hardest workers of any athlete I've ever worked with in my life. One of the most disciplined, dedicated guys. So it's an honor to be on the call with you. And now to answer your question, and I will get sidetracked and off topic. That's kind of what I do, but I'll always come back around, I promise. But during this time, you know, I think a lot of people, myself included, and a lot of professional athletes, they can sometimes fall into this trap where you're spending your time and your energy focusing on all the stuff that you can't do right now. The things that you don't have access to, that you can't play games with your team, or you can't practice with your team, or maybe you can't go to the gym. And I think I would really, really strongly encourage you to stop doing that and to really think about counting your blessings and thinking about all the stuff that you can do. So I know that maybe you're not training in the way that you normally would, or the way that you think is best or optimal, but there are so many things that you can do. And I know that if I think about myself personally, my mobility and my flexibility stink. They're really bad. They're even worse than yours, Mike, which is pretty bad. But you know, that's something that I never usually spend enough time on. There's no reason why I can't be doing those things at home. You know, you need, you know, you can do it without any equipment at all. Or if you really want to step it up and get a lacrosse ball or a foam roller, spend some time on that can help a lot. There are so many things I think about. I talk about this a lot, but players back in the day, I'm an old fart, but even older than me, there were guys that got into phenomenal shape without access to fancy gyms or fancy equipment or seeing experts like me. Some of those simple body weight exercises are just as effective now as they were then. And I know for a fact, I'll get lots of like high-end junior players, and we're talking guys, you know, OHL stars, world junior team members, you know, NHL drafted players. And some of these guys come in and they've been training at these fancy gyms, and they can't do push-ups, they can't do chin-ups, they can't do single-legged squats, and all those things are so simple, and you can do all that stuff now. So really, really do your best to try to focus on all the things that you can do. And there's lots of them. And I'm happy if we have Q&A at the end, we can go through lots of examples, or you can contact me after the seminar. There's lots of things that you can do. And I'd spend a little more time focusing on that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great message. And you mentioned my flexibility there. We won't go into that today. But it's not pretty either. When I trained with you, I really, it was pretty obvious that even though we were hockey players and I trained with a group of hockey players, that you put a really big emphasis on training as athletes and being athletic. And I think sometimes in hockey, everything's hockey related, hockey focused, and it's about on the ice, it's about skills, it's about, doing stuff in the gym that's very hockey specific. And I always found that interesting that you trained us as hockey players more as probably athletes. And I remember even sometimes, like the one couple of times we went and played beach volleyball on a beach volleyball court, for our, different aspects of being athletic and doing a lot of different sprinting drills on the turf and really athletic things. Can you just touch a little bit on why you believe that's so important for young hockey players to train as athletes and not just hockey players?
Absolutely. And this actually ties in really nicely with the last question, because a lot of those things, you don't need a weight room, you don't need a gym, you can do a lot of these things on your own. And Mike is right. We still do that. This is not just something that's good for little kids, but once you become a pro and everything's got to be serious, then you do the serious stuff. And Mike can verify, and he can testify that this is really what we do. But we do gymnastic style training. We go to a gymnastics club and we do gymnastic style training. We play beach volleyball. We play squash. Sometimes we even play basketball. We run on the track all the time. We're doing track and speed type work all the time. And it's fun, which is great, but that's not why we do it. The fun is a really, really nice bonus, a little side effect, but we do it because I believe it does make you a better athlete. And if you think about the game of hockey, a lot of times we break it down into individual components, stick handling drills that we do with all kinds of different apparatus on the ice and our head down and our eyes down, or, power skating drills that we're really focused on everything being perfect and doing it, precision like in a straight line, working on our edges. And those are all important things to do. Those are not bad things. They're very important. But when you take all that stuff out and you put it into a game environment, and you look at most of the goals that are scored, they're usually a guy flying 1,000 miles an hour, off balance. People are coming to hit you. You got to avoid other players. You need that athleticism. You need that spatial awareness. You need that hand-eye coordination at full speed, not just standing still. And those are things that are really tough, maybe impossible to develop in that controlled environment in the gym. But if you think back, Mike, when we were playing beach volleyball, everyone was having a great time. It was fun, but also, and I've got a great video that I share sometimes. I had a Boyd Devereaux, okay, another great guy, Kitchener local area guy who was a client of mine for a long time, Stanley Cup winner. He shot an amazing video for me, and we looked at all of our guys playing beach volleyball, but just from the waist down, analyzing their movement from the waist down. And then we looked at those same guys playing in NHL or OHL games from the waist down, and it was a lot of the same movement patterns. Okay, and I think that some of the times you see, young players stuck out on the field for a half an hour, running around pylons, running through ladders. All that stuff is fine. It's not bad. It's good. In my opinion, any kind of training, as long as you're not hurting yourself, is good. But the movements on the beach volleyball court, or the movements in the gymnastics court, or the movements on the squash court, they actually look a lot more similar to hockey, and they're done full intensity with full enthusiasm, all out, everything you got. So a lot of those things are things that, now you can be doing, you still can be doing them because you just need your own body weight to move like an athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, we showed a video in one of the earlier sessions actually of Ryan O'Reilly balancing on a balance beam and using a stick and use it as an example. And I think, things like that, like hockey's, it's such a sport of being off balance all the time and being on one foot and getting hit and finding a way, that I think that's a really important message, is that you've got to train that way to make sure when that happens on the ice, can do a 2-footed squat and be really stable, but half the time you're on the ice, that's not the position you're in. So.
And you said something, Mike, you said something really important there. You said, and I've seen that video, Ryan, and I know Ryan, he's an amazing guy, an amazing player. And you said something key is that aspect of finding a way. So whether that's Ryan O'Reilly finding a way to balance on a balance beam while he's juggling a ball or a puck, or finding a way to stay in shape or stay fit or stay mobile during these times where you don't have access, that's the key to success at whatever the next level is for you. If that's midget, OHL, NCAA, CIS, maybe NHL, who knows, maybe if all the dreams come true, but finding a way to get it done when things aren't optimal, that's how you score goals and that's how you get through COVID.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to talk a lot about like habits today and really get into habits and specifically off-ice habits. So we're going to talk about things like nutrition, sleep, recovery, flexibility, all these different things that are kind of more off the ice, but obviously have a huge impact on when you do hit the ice or staying healthy and being able to hit the ice. Can you speak on the importance of these habits and these off-ice things? I think, again, hockey players often look at it and they focus on the practices and the games, but how important are these things off the ice that, you don't really always see when a hockey player steps on the ice?
Yeah, they're so important. And I can think of something now. I grew up, I played football. That was my sport. But I remember being about 14 years old and being at a football camp and a coach telling us that, right now at this moment, there's a million other guys, I'm not sure if that number is accurate, but it doesn't matter. You get the point. There's a million other kids right now that are all, out here out on the field somewhere, training, trying to get better. What are you going to do that's going to separate you from all those other guys? And every time that you're out there, there's one guy who's also out there who's working harder than you. He did one more push-up than you did. He did one more sprint that you did. So how are you going to separate yourself? How are you going to differentiate yourself? So I think right now with those off-ice habits, okay, in pre-COVID times or before all this bad stuff happened, okay, you go to practice and you work hard at practice. Well, you know what? Everybody else does too. That's not special anymore. That's not going to get you. Just that's not going to get you to the next level. So maybe you go to a gym and you train with a guy like me. Well, you know what? There's a lot of guys that are doing that. What else are you willing to do? So I think there's so many of those things that I see. And it's funny, the ones that guys come around to last, or girls, not just guys, that come around to last in their training. I know a lot of young, really, really exceptional players who work hard at practice, who do stick handling drills on their own, who train with a trainer like me, but they go to bed at midnight and they don't have a good night's sleep. They get up late for school, they rush out the door, they have a crappy breakfast. And those are the two things you don't have to hire some expert person to help you with. They don't cost, getting to bed on time doesn't cost you anything. There's a lot of those habits that I think we don't understand how important they are or how impactful they can be until you do them right. And I can tell you, because I've seen this dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of times with NHL players who are really skilled, they're blessed with lots of talent, they work really hard, they're doing almost everything right and just improving their sleep. And I'm not talking about crazy stuff. I mean, just going from getting to bed at 11 or 11:30 to going to bed at 10:30 or 10, just that is enough to propel them to the next level. I've seen it. All of a sudden, they're gaining more muscle than they were before. They're getting stronger than they were before. Their sprint times are faster just from getting to bed an hour earlier. It really can be that significant, and just when we talk about nutrition, that's such a huge topic. And I think people get really, really focused on a lot of little minor details, but I think you could even start today. We all know for the most part, all the stuff that you probably shouldn't be eating, all the junk, all the crap, absolutely, I could be better. And today's probably the worst day ever to have this conversation, Super Bowl Sunday. And I know my diet's going to be less than optimal, but I'm going to be better on Monday. I guarantee you that, and we can all drink a little more water. We can all eat a little more vegetables. We can all make sure, we're getting up on time in the morning before our virtual school or regular school or whatever, and getting a good breakfast. There's so many things that we can do.
Yeah, for sure. In a previous webinar too, we talked a little about the idea of running your own race and really focusing on yourself, not comparing yourself to others. Everyone develops at different speeds and times. And you get guys coming to you to train sometimes as early as, 14, 15 years old. And then you kind of see them progress through to 17, 18, 19, even 2020. Like you've seen guys go from basically young kids to, fully mature adults that are, NHL stars. And we talked a little bit about that, but can you just talk about that? Or even if there's an example of a person, or just talk about how that looks, like seeing a person. We talked about playing the long game a little bit. I guess that's the best way to put it, and not really focusing on, the day-to-day results, but playing a longer game and really, really, believing in yourself and putting the work in, and that it will eventually come, even if you're a guy that, hasn't physically developed yet. Can you touch on that after seeing so many athletes come through to you at young ages and then moving up and getting older?
Absolutely. And if you want an example, I mean, you don't have to look too far. If anyone watched that Toronto Maple Leafs game last night, there's a guy there who's been a client of mine for about 10 years, Wayne Simmons, single A, double A player, passed over by every OHL team. No one wanted him. No one thought he was good enough to play OHL hockey. 2 goals last night. This guy's a former MVP of the NHL All-Star game. I think he's had a 13-year career now. They don't come much better than that. So that's a fantastic example of a guy who, too skinny, bad skater, didn't have access to, certainly not a privileged guy in terms of having access to skating coaches and stick handling coaches and strength trainers. He didn't have the best of the best. And a lot of the training he did is stuff that, everything we're talking about, not having access to the best strength and conditioning facility or the best on ice coaches. That was him pre-COVID. That's how he made it, just based on sheer will, believing in himself and working hard. That's the easiest example that pops to mind. But I think there are so many examples. I've seen so many guys like that. And we're talking about NHL Hall of Famers that fall into that category too. So I think that everyone has their own challenges. Everyone's got a different road that they've got to travel, and for some of us, it's a little harder than others. But I think if you believe in yourself and you keep working, I've seen it too many times to believe that it is possible. Anyone can do it.
Yeah, and it goes the other way too, where I think you've probably seen other guys that, are at the top of the food chain when they're younger, and slowly, other guys catch up, other guys, get better, and they're on the way down when other people are going up. So it can work both ways. But this has been awesome, Maddie. Thanks so much for joining us. Lots of great messages. And thanks again for stopping by and sharing some of your wisdom with everyone on the call today.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We'll continue on with our presentation here, guys. Like we said earlier, going to talk a lot about habits today, and off-ice habits specifically, and habit in the most basic sense in the definition is, an acquired mode of behavior that has become nearly or completely involuntary. So it's something that you basically do over and over. It becomes ingrained in you, and it's almost a subconscious decision that you make because you've done it so many times. And I think the big thing to point out here is that there are good habits and there's bad habits. So everyone knows what bad habits are, and often those are the ones that are talked about a lot, whether it's in hockey or just in general in life. Bad habits that people have that they shouldn't have. But we want to talk about how to improve our habits today and talk more about the good habits. And to form good habits, like I said earlier with the definition, you have to be constantly doing it over and over until it becomes nearly or completely involuntary, and repeating it over and over and over. How long does that take to form a habit? And the question, I don't have an answer to it, to be honest with you. I've read things that have told me it takes 18 months to form habits. I've read things that have told me it takes 30 days to form a habit. So I don't think anyone has a real good answer on how long it takes, but I think the most important part is that you have to start somewhere. And I think an important part and piece of the puzzle too is setting yourself up for success. And when I say setting yourself up for success for a habit, some examples of this are Maddie just talked about, waking up early in the morning and, getting a good breakfast and things like that. Or if you're planning on getting up early in the morning to get a workout in, the little things that you guys do to set yourself up for that are extremely important. And the reminders that you can kind of give yourselves, or little hacks to do that, and things like that. I'm talking about, if you're waking up for workout, lay your clothes out the night before. Get your water bottle ready. So when you get up, everything's ready for you. You don't have to worry about that. There's nothing stopping you. Things like stretching or flexibility. Leave your foam roller, in your living room. Leave a stretching band in your living room where it's visible and you can see it and it reminds you to do it. You don't have to run upstairs and go get it and worry about that. Eating healthy, having stuff in your house is usually, some people have trouble with that. So make sure that it's hidden away. The bad food's hidden away. Maybe leave the healthy food out where it's in plain sight. So when you walk by, there's an apple or a banana right there to grab if you're feeling hungry, instead of reaching for something, nutritious. So I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, is setting yourself up for success when it comes to your habits. 1%, and everything we talk about today is basically going to be about 1%. And 1% is probably not even the right way to put it. It's probably actually a more accurate way to put it is 0.0000001%. Because the things that we're going to talk about are so little and they're so daily in terms of what we do, eating meals, stretching every day, all these different things that are such small things, but when you add them up and you add up those 0.0001%, they can make a big thing. And over time, they can really add up. And there's something that I find is one of the most important things for me, or athletes in general, and it's got a fancy name. It's called the aggregation of marginal gains. And what it is basically exactly what I just said. Over time, if you add up all those little things that you did over the course of a week, it might not matter much. Over the course of a month, it might not matter much. But once you start getting into 6 months, 12 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, these things are going to add up so much that they are going to make a huge impact on whatever habit or whatever part of your development you're trying to improve. So I recently saw this picture. I thought it was really cool and a really kind of interesting way of looking at it. But this is like a rock that's had water dripping on it. And on the left, you can see that left side there is 15 years that water's been dripping on it. So you can see there's a little bit of a rut there, a little bit of an indent that it's made, the water, due to the erosion that it's causing. And then in the middle, you can see 25 years of erosion, and the rut's obviously much bigger. It's been dripping for longer. And then on the right, 50 years of erosion, you can see there's a much larger rut there. And that water's been dripping on the rock for 50 years. So you can see it's made a bigger indent there. And I think it's a really good picture to kind of sum up what I'm talking about is, when you walk by this little rock or whatever you want to call it, you walk by and you see the water dripping there. You don't really think that water could make a big mark on that rock. But once you add up a year after year after year, after decade, then you can see how much of an impact all these little drips of water can make on the rock. And it's just a metaphor basically for your body and your development, and how easily, or not easily, but how these little things can add up over the course of time. Matty talked a little bit about sleep in his presentation, and I'm glad he did, because for me, this is probably one of the most undervalued things in athletes, but also just in general. And I don't think we talk about how important sleep is to the health, especially of young people. When it comes to mood, it comes to performance in your athletics, it comes to your health in general, and it also comes to recovery. And I'm not a sleep expert by any means, but I think there are some things that you can do that I've personally read about that can help your sleeping habits. I know some people can go to bed, and I'm one of them, where you can just basically put your head on the pillow and 5 minutes later you're asleep. But I do know there's lots of other people that really have problems sleeping. And it's a topic that isn't always easy for some people. They rustle around, they lay there, for hours on end. And next thing you know, you wake up in the morning and you're tired, and then the cycle continues and you never really get that good sleep. So there are some little hacks and routines that I've read about, whether it's, a routine at the end of the day, keeping your room cooler, keeping the room a calm environment, no screens before bed. It's been proven that, the blue light on the screens, whether it's an iPad or a TV or whatever, can affect your sleep habits. And I think just in general, having a routine and really sticking with it, your body clock will thank you for that. Going to bed at a similar time every night, waking up at a similar time, and sticking with that routine. But I really can't stress enough, guys, especially guys and gals, I should say, for young athletes, sleep is such an important piece of the puzzle. And if you're shortcutting your sleep, then you aren't going to be the best you can be. Nutrition and hydration. And again, this is one Matt touched on in his talk. And again, I'm not an expert on these things, so I can't get too much into depth on exactly what you should be eating, exactly what you should be drinking. But Matt basically said it best when he said, everyone kind of knows deep down what's good food for you, what's bad food, what's good drinks, what isn't good drinks. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out, what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating, making healthier choices. And I think if you're going to be a premier athlete, or you want to have success in athletics in whatever sport you're playing, then this is a topic that really shouldn't be overlooked and is a huge piece of the puzzle, and is, again, one of those 1% that we talked about earlier on. Recovery. And this is one that hits close to home for me. I'm going to tell a quick story about my own personal piece of my career. And I was playing hockey at St. Lawrence University. I was a freshman there in my first year, and I never really had any injury problems other than the typical stuff that, hockey players or athletes would have, whether it was a broken bone from a big hit or whatever. But I never had real actual muscle injuries. I guess we can call them overuse injuries, where you strain a muscle and it turns into something bigger. And I found myself my first year going through it. We were on the ice a lot, we were working out a lot, but I wasn't taking care of my body the right way. I was working extremely hard, don't get me wrong, on the ice and off the ice, but my warm-ups weren't good enough. My cool downs weren't good enough. My stretching, rolling out, things like that was non-existent. And it eventually caught up to me, and I ended up, feeling a pain in my groin or hip area, and thought it was just a regular, strain or whatever. And I'd sit out a week or two and it would be all right. And after going to a doctor, I found out I actually needed sports hernia surgery. And I eventually got that done and was out for a couple of months. So it's really important to take care of this stuff, flexibility piece, the stretching, rolling out, prehab, I guess you could call it, and basically taking care of your body in a way that you're going to prevent injury before it even happens. And the tough part about that is you're never really going to know if it's working. The only way you will know is if you're not injured. But it's one of those things where you do it, and the payoff is you get to play. You make sure you're not injured. You're not on the rehab table. You're not having to sit out games and things like that. And another thing for me, this is probably more applicable to guys and girls that are older and at a higher competitive level. But I found a real big benefit in things that I guess you can consider body work. So things like massage, active release therapy with ART, chiro, and really keeping your body in tune and keeping it primed and ready to go, and preventing injury that way. And I think recovery is a huge piece of the puzzle for any athletes, no matter what sport you're in. We're going to switch gears a little bit here. And we were talking about more physical habits earlier on, but I thought an important part of this presentation too was to talk about some things off the ice that aren't exactly physical and aren't exactly going to technically improve your on-ice ability or make you a better hockey player, but things that we really value in our organization in Kitchener. And one of them, and this word is thrown around a lot, is respect. And it's one of our rules that we have for our guys and one of our core values. And I think it's an important piece to touch on. And the things that fall in the being a good teammate, being coachable, being respectful to everyone. And I put at the bottom, you never know who will find out or is watching. And I think that's really important. And that's something we really stress with our players is be a good person, whether you're in a hotel, whether you're on the bus, whether you're interacting with fans at a community event. It doesn't matter. We want guys that are respectful. They're good people. They're polite. They do things the right way off the ice, and you never know who's watching you. It's a small world. So carry yourself the proper way at all times when you're off the ice. And I think respecting people is a huge piece of that. Social media, again, this is another one that isn't exactly a physical thing, but I wanted to touch on it quickly because I know how relevant social media is right now, especially to a lot of the people on this call and the age of people on this call. And I'm going to split this into two pieces. Number one, social media is obviously an amazing thing. It connects people. It does a lot of great things. It can raise money for charities. It can, tell amazing stories about people. You name it. There's so many great pieces of social media, and I think we all have found that out by now, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or whatever. I know Snapchat and TikTok are big now, but there's a lot of bad sides to social media too. And I'm sure many people have seen the movie Social Dilemma on Netflix. And it's a really interesting dive into how social media controls us. And I think it's really important to talk a little bit about social media for our younger athletes on the call today. And the first piece I want to talk about is be about tying your self-value and self-worth to social media. And what I mean by that is, when you get older, and even for our players, guys that are playing the OHL, if you have a social media account, that's pretty much free access to you from strangers and people you don't know. And if you have a bad game or something goes wrong, it's very easy and accessible for someone to comment on that. And I think it's really important that don't allow social media to control who you are as a person, and base your confidence in yourself and your value in yourself on how many likes a picture gets, how many comments it gets, if people are commenting whether they like it or they don't like it. And I think it's a really important point to raise to young people, because you guys are all living in the social media age now. And I never grew up in that age. And I have two little kids that aren't on social media yet because they're too little, but I think it's a really important piece to remember. And the other second part of that is, I always do talks with minor midget AAA teams and teams that are a little bit older, and talk about social media. And we've seen examples of it recently in the last 4 or 5, 6 years, even, where pro athletes have, tweeted or put something out on Instagram that isn't something that's appropriate. And that's the warning I'll give everyone, is once it's out there, and you got to be really careful about what you're putting out into social media. And it can impact your career, it can impact your life. And so just really think long and hard about what you're putting out there, and allowing, and who you allow access to you on social media. I think that's a really important piece to the off-ice side of things, even though it's not exactly a physical thing that can actually help you when you step on the ice. This is a really important slide, and I don't know if anyone on the call knows who Joel Embiid is from the Philadelphia 76ers, but I put a picture of him up for this slide because many of you, I'm sure, know that his big line is trust the process. And it's actually turned into kind of a funny funny little thing. And it was actually his general manager at the time, a guy named Sam Hinkie, who came up and coined the phrase. But ever since, he came up with that, and Joel Embiid has kind of used it as his own now, it's became a really kind of catchy phrase that a lot of people use: trust the process, stick to the process. I'm sure everyone's heard at one point in their life, heard about the process or sticking to the process. And it's almost become probably cliche at this point, and probably overused, to be honest. But the reason it's overused is because it's actually a great point, and it's really important. And I think talking a little bit about your core values as a person and your process as a person can be really important. And I challenge everyone, depending on what age you are, but really think long and hard about who you are as a person and the things that you really value as a person. And even sit down with a pen and paper and write down your core values and things that you think are really important to you as a person, whether it's in not just in hockey, but in life, and whether it's 3 to 5 or whether there's 8 or 10 or 10 to 12. I recently did this exercise and wrote down 10 to 12 things that I really, really value in myself as a person, and the way I want to act, the way I want to be perceived, not just in my job or in hockey, but in life in general. And it's a really interesting way to kind of keep yourself on track, and write it down somewhere and come back to it later and really look at it and think, am I doing these things? Am I sticking to my core values? And again, same thing with your process. Write down what you think your process is. Whether it's, a list of 3 to 5 things, or in more detail of what you really feel your process is for getting better as an athlete or getting better as a person. Write it down and save it someplace, and come back to it once a week or once, a couple times every month, and look at it and really think long and hard about, am I sticking to my process? Am I sticking to my core values? And I think that can be a really good exercise. I've recently done it over the past few months, and I found it really keeps me on track, and it's a great way to kind of keep yourself on track and make sure you're holding yourself accountable for the way you want to live your life. So just another tip or thing you can do to try to get yourself better. Couple book recommendations before we get into any questions that we have this week. The book on the left, Atomic Habits, and the book on the right, The Power of Habit, are both really good books. I've read both of them, that are strictly dealing with habits and how we form habits, good habits, bad habits, tips and hacks on how we can shape our habits, how we can make them better. I found them really helpful. So if you're a person that wants to learn more about habits and really immerse yourself in how you can do that, I would definitely recommend both those books. And the one in the middle is called Chop Wood and Carry Water by Joshua Medcalf. And this is a really good book. I would recommend this book for any age, whether you're 7 years old or whether you're 17 or 18 years old. We actually to read this book this summer and kind of submit like a half-page book report on it and what it meant to them and some of the lessons they learned. But this book is basically about sticking to a process and really focusing on the things that you can control. And it's a great book. It's really, really simple to read. It's an easy read. It's not long. It's not complicated. And that would be a book I would really recommend for any age, any level, any athlete. And I think it's a really, really useful book to start off learning more about kind of what a process looks like and how that looks. So those would be a couple book recommendations this week for any of our readers out there. And that wraps up the presentation for this week. I think there are a couple of questions in the Q&A right now, but I'll turn it over to Mike and he can moderate the Q&A if anyone does have any questions.
Great. So yeah, we have at least a couple questions right now. And if anyone else has others that they think of, feel free to go ahead and submit them. The first one I think might have been initially addressed to Matt, but I think you could probably speak to it as well, Mike, is when NHL players are working out or warming up before games. Could you take us through what that type of workout would look like?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's different for every athlete. I know there's some guys that, don't need a big buildup of a warm up or a workout. And for them, they can have a coffee, go get active for 5 or 10 minutes, do some light stuff and jump on the ice for warm up, and they're ready to go and they don't need a lot. And there's also some other guys that need a lot more when it comes to warming up. And I found when I was playing hockey, actually, I was one of those people that thought they didn't need that much earlier on. And as my career went on, I really found a benefit to actually warming up more and warming up harder, to the point where it was almost like a miniature workout before the game. And that I found when I warmed up more and I got more of a sweat before the game, I always worried that I would be tired going into the game and I would fatigue myself. And it actually worked the opposite. I was actually more ready for the game. And when the puck dropped, I was completely ready to go. So I implemented way more actual warm up time. And I know in the NHL, everyone's different. I can't speak to every person, but I do know there would be some guys that really warm up a lot, to the point where they've got a full sweat going and they even feel a little bit, like they've just done kind of a mini workout to a certain extent. So different for everyone. I think you got to find what works for you. But I know from personal experience, I went from not doing too much to doing more, and it really helped me being prepared for the game.
So next question is centered around bedtime routines and sleep, I guess, and it's focused on, I guess, what are some of the benefits for someone who, has never emphasized this before, or if they implement a new bedtime routine, say, what can they expect to be the benefit out of that?
Well, everything, if it helps you sleep more and better, I think. In terms of performance, if you're an athlete, I'm not a sleep expert by any means, so I will preface everything by saying that I'm not going to get into the exact science of it all, but it's hugely important for recovery. And the time that you're sleeping is really the time when your body's repairing itself. So whether you've done a hard workout the day before, or you've played a hard game, or whatever it may be, that time that you're sleeping is when your body is recovering the most. And lack of sleep can be extremely detrimental, I think, to the mood of a person, just your life in general. Never mind, forget athletics and hockey, but just in general, like, we've all been there before, where we're so tired because we didn't sleep well, or we're trying to catch up on sleep, that we can barely get anything done in a day, or you're sitting at school and you're tired and your eyes are half shut, and it's just not good. So anything from mood to healing, the benefits of sleep are just anywhere in life and hockey. I think it's a hugely important thing. And like I said, I'm not a sleep expert, so I can't give you the exact things, but creating that routine is going to allow your body to adjust. And really, if your bedtime is 10 o'clock and you've been doing that over and over and over, then once it gets to 10 o'clock, your body kind of knows that it's time for bed, and it has that internal clock where it's ready to shut down. And after time, that habit just becomes almost automatic. And same with waking up early. And a lot of people will, if they wake up at the same time every day, a lot of people will tell you they don't even need an alarm clock most days, because their body just kind of wakes them up naturally at that time, because it's so used to it. So I think routines are extremely important when it comes to sleep.
Very true for anyone who's a parent of a young kid as well. But next question is from a parent, actually, and they have a 7 and 11-year-old who both play hockey at a high level, and they're wondering if you have any thoughts on what age make sense to introduce weight training?
That's a good question. I wish Matt was still on the call because he could answer that one way better than I can. I'm a little skeptical to even give my answer because I don't want to lead you in the wrong direction. Like I said, I'm not an expert on weight training and things like that. I personally think it's been proven from what I gather that, a lot of younger kids are starting to lift weights if it's in a controlled and safe environment with someone watching them that knows what they're doing and can really focus to make sure that they're not doing anything improperly where they're going to hurt themselves. So I know it has been getting younger and younger, but I don't want to say for sure on that one.
Fair enough. Maybe two rapid fire questions. One might have a similar answer to that, to what you just mentioned. One person is asking what's the next session about, and a second is asking if you had any general exercises for explosiveness or getting quicker. And I'm not sure if that's on ice or off ice.
Yeah, the next session is going to be about more on ice development. So today's session was more about off ice and strictly off ice development. So the next session will be more about on ice development, from a lot to do with practices and how you can actually improve yourself on the ice and your hockey skill set. In terms of explosive drills, like I said, I'm not a trainer, so I'm not 100% sure, but from what I've gathered, whenever I've trained, I think things that you do fast are going to make you fast. So if you want to get faster and more explosive, you have to train by doing things fast and doing them explosive, if that makes any sense. So, I mean, depending on what age you are, I know, some people, look at doing Olympic lifts, things like, hang cleans or power cleans, because those are very explosive movements. Things like sprint work, even if you're a hockey player, doing sprint work off the ice, but basically anything that trains your fast twitch muscles. And you don't get faster or more explosive by not doing things that are fast and explosive. I guess that would be my best piece of advice without getting into too much detail, because like I said, I'm not totally an expert on that area.
For sure. And I think probably goes without saying, Olympic lifts are definitely something to do under the supervision of an expert as well. They're an easy one to hurt yourself doing. Next question, and there might be time for one or two more. How important do you think playing multiple sports was in your career? I think from past webinars, having talked about playing lacrosse growing up as well. And did you learn any lessons from that you still apply today?
Yeah, it was really important for me. And it was, like I said, I think I mentioned it in one of the earlier webinars, is that once hockey ended for us, we put our hockey skates and sticks away and we played lacrosse right up until hockey started again. Then we put our lacrosse stuff away and we play hockey for hockey season. So I didn't play spring hockey or anything like that. I love playing lacrosse. It was awesome. Great sport. Things that it taught me or carry over into other sports or hockey specifically. It's a really physical sport. So getting that feeling contact and feeling guys on your back and on your shoulder, and playing in close quarters with contact. I think that really helped. And oftentimes when I actually watch players play, you can kind of tell sometimes a little bit who plays lacrosse by the way they play hockey and the way they're able to kind of spin off checks and feel kind of pressure and feel comfortable with pressure and guys on them and spin off and roll off. So I think the hand-eye coordination is another huge piece, playing lacrosse that transferred over to hockey. But I think in general, it made me more athletic. It was a great way to stay active in the summer. You're basically running around all game. I thought it was a great sport, but there's tons of great sports out there too. I played lacrosse, but baseball, soccer, whatever. Yeah, I think it's great for kids to play different sports. And like Matt touched on, being an athlete and getting to experience different sports and just being athletic in general. I think that's awesome.
Great. And one last question is from a 14-year-old hockey player who they personally also play baseball. But I guess focusing on the hockey side, which is probably most relevant for all listeners, would you think at that age it's more important to focus on strength training or agility and skill training, or does it just depend on the player?
I think it depends on the player. I think you probably want to look at what your strengths are as a player. And some of those things are probably better than whether you have a really good strength base right now, or maybe you're really skilled in terms of your hands and shooting and things like that. So I would look at those areas and domains and probably find which one I'm weakest in, and then attack that weakness, and then do more of that, whether it's the strength or the agility or the skill training. But I would still try to do all of them. But like anyone knows, there's only so many hours in a day to do things and so many hours to train in a day. So sometimes you do have to make hard decisions on what you choose. And I would look at it and probably find out which one's my weakest and focus in on that one while trying to also maintain or improve the other ones at the same time. But it really depends on what type of player you are and what type of body you have right now and what your skills and weaknesses are.
Great. And maybe time for one last quick question is, for an 11-year-old specifically, which of these 3 habit books would you recommend most?
I think the actual habit books may be a little dull for an 11-year-old. I would read Chop Wood, Carry Water personally. It's not specifically just about habits, but it's about everything really. I don't even know how to describe it, but I would read Chop Wood, Carry Water. That would be my number 1 book for an 11-year-old right now.
Great.
Okay, well, that wraps up our session this week, guys and girls. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We will have one more next week, same time, noon on Sunday, and we look forward to seeing everyone on Sunday. Have a good week.